welcome to this panel on the early years of Clowns Without Borders. My name is Naomi Shafer, and I am so excited to be here with you. If you are watching, you can type in questions if you have a question that you want to ask, and otherwise, you're stuck with my questions. We are here today with Michael O'Neill, Moshe Cohen, and David Lichtenstein, and they're actually going to introduce themselves, which is, you know, I could try to do a bio and then leave out something very important and like, oh, feel terrible about myself, or I can say, hey, Moshe, who are you? Where are you? And what's your connection to Clowns Without Borders? You have to unmute yourself.
I have to unmute myself.
No, we hear you now.
You hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
You want me to make my own story up?
Yeah, I want you to say who are you? Who are you? Where are you? And what's your connection to Clowns Without Borders?
I'm here in San Francisco, actually, speaking to you from a sunny day. And we need rain. Bring the rain back. We haven't gotten enough of it. Yeah, that's my story.
Okay. What's your connection to Clowns Without Borders?
Oh, that's a long story. How much of that do you want?
Oh, I want. Oh, you need to mute yourself, please. I just want to know a little bit of, like, you know, who are you in connection to Clowns Without Borders?
Well, you know, Tortel, my friend Tortel Poltrona started Clowns Without Borders in 1993 because kids in an intranet project between Croatia and Barcelona schools the kids in Barcelona asked the kids in Kosovo, I mean, in Croatia, what do you need? You know, what are you missing? They said, we need to laugh. And so they sent a clown, and that was Tortel. And Tortel came back raving about doing a show for 700 very eager participating audience members and wanting to do more. And so they went back 2 months later. Tortel went with Boni and Karoli, two wonderful unicycle juggling super artists. And they did a tour, not just one school. And then that started a whole movement. And I was like jazzed because I had gone to Chiapas in 1987 to do shows in Guatemalan refugee camps. And I'd been to South Africa for 2 months in 91 to work with homeless kids and go into the apartheid schools and do shows. And I went with Wavy Gravy in 93 and 94 to the Caribbean, to these very poor neighborhoods of St. Thomas and St. John's to do work in the schools there. And so I was already engaged in this kind of activity. And when I found out that Tortel had started Clowns Without Borders, I was really very enthusiastic. And I said to the folks in Spain, you know, I'd like to bring this to the States. And they said, please do. So I just declared that I'm Clowns Without Borders. And I started calling up my friends who are artists and saying, hey, let's do something. And it took a few years before people actually came with me on a trip in 1999. And then 1996, 97, 98, I was going to Chiapas and doing shows, tours there, and a few other projects in Nepal, and so that's how I started becoming involved with Clowns Without Borders.
Yay! And I know that one of those friends that you called is here, so I'm going to now say, hey, David, hey, Leap and Louie, will you unmute yourself and say who you are, where you are, and what your connection to Clowns Without Borders is?
My connection is Moshe next to me here. So yeah, David Lichtenstein, known as Leap and Louie in the circus world. And I've been making a living doing comedy circus shows for 30 years now. And Moshe, more than 30 years, Moshe like called and said that there's all these people in refugee camps in Chiapas and they got nothing to do, and let's go visit them and do shows for them. In 1999, when the Zapatista War was hot, and me and Rudy Galindo went on that trip, and both me and Rudy stuck with it, and we both started bringing new people on projects every year. And by the second or third year, I was organizing my own projects with help of the hard work was usually done by the organizers down on the ground down there, Peter and Alexandria and
Pablo Romo.
yeah. And back there in 1999, I did a benefit show to pay for those flights because it was just like, okay, yeah. So, you know, do a show. So we did a show in my living room, and then started doing Portland shows every year to finance my trips and other people's trips, and bringing new people all the time, and went to a bunch to Chiapas, a few trips to Guatemala, a few to Haiti, then eventually the Balkans, Dallas, South Africa.
And here we are, the 22nd annual Portland fundraiser. And kind of as we're speaking of Portland,
I should add one more thing, is that there was the organization was Moshe, and his computer and the mailing address was his apartment. And then he decided, you know, we got to make a real organization and a board of directors, and it's time. And he handed it off. And that's a dangerous time in an organization. And it went really well. And it's grown to where we can have professional people like you running it now, Naomi.
As I scowl at my computer to do this transition, of one of those friends you called in part of also this base of Portland was Michael O'Neill. So Michael, I'd love for you to say who you are. I've just said you're in Portland, but you can say where you are. You can say it again, and your original connection to CWB.
Yeah, I'm Michael O'Neill. I'm in Portland, Oregon, specifically at the Art Barn. You can ask me about that later. David, I started working with David. David and I talked at the Juggling Festival. I think it was 2002. We chatted. I can't remember what actual year it was. And then I helped him do the fundraiser that next year to raise funds to go to Chiapas with Rudy Galindo, and also Heather Pearl and Zuzka Zabata came on that trip. And we did a bunch of shows. I don't even know. I think it was 03. And yeah, so that my connection with Clowns Without Borders is David. And I met Moshe a year before that and chatted him about it as well. And it took some time just to organize and get the right people and the right things, because Rudy is the one that got the trip organized for Chiapas for us. So yeah, that's my first moment in connection with Clowns Without Borders was David here in Portland.
Ooh.
And I'm still here.
You're still here. And here we are. And what I want to know is, when you think back, each of you is thinking back of the past 22 years of performing with Clowns Without Borders. I want to know a moment with an audience member that stands out, or a moment with a show that stands out. And I want to know, like, what's a moment that you're like, this is my moment. And I'm not going to say it has to be the best. You don't have to rank them. I know there's so many, but I want to know a moment that stands out. Wow, you all are looking away from me right now. So who's gonna give me a thumbs up and say that you're ready to share? Moshe, it's all
Well,
you.
I mean, it's hard to choose a moment, but I think that one thing that really stands out for me are the chase scenes that we would do in shows. And, you know, like in Chiapas, and also when I went to the Bhutanese refugee camps in Nepal, most of the people there had no access to television or movies and had really very little exposure to performing arts in general. They'd never seen a live show. And so usually we'd throw some form of a clown chase scene into a show, because that was always very popular. Grown-ups running after each other, mad at each other. How ridiculous is that? Yeah. It's very ridiculous. And yes, if you have not been brought up with cartoons and so on, where you see that all the time, it was like a big laugh moment, usually. And when I went to Nepal in I think it was 97, I met up with the Spanish group there, Desastrosus Circus, and we had intended to do shows together. I was going to work with Tibetan refugees. They were going to work with the Maite organization that works with sex trafficking victims who came back from India. And the Spanish group had found out about these 100,000 Bhutanese refugees living in camps, in 7 camps in the very southeast of Nepal. And nobody knew about them. They were kind of like hidden. And when we found out, we were like, we have to go there. And we did. It took a little time, trouble, and effort. And finally, we took this 18-hour bus trip down there. It was pretty funny, actually, because, you know, we're in Kathmandu in Nepal, and they offer us, we rent a van from a tourist company and a driver to take us to these camps. And they come with this little Toyota van, and there's 8 of us, plus all this equipment. And we see the size of the van, and we're just like shaking our heads, like, we're not going to be able to fit, you know, how many clowns can you fit in a clown car? I don't know, but it wasn't going to work. And they said, oh, no problem, no problem. We'll bring a bigger vehicle, and it'll cost you $25 more. And we're like, okay. And they came back with this school bus. But cutting back to the chase scene. So there we are doing a show for 5,000 people. And it's a really big circle, and for the audience, so that we can actually have people seeing. And there's a chase scene in there. And the chase scene is going very well. And Juanito, one of the Desastrosus Circus, is playing the accordion. Now, I have to say that, you know, I'm bald, right? And when I would take off my hat in those camps during the show for the first time, it would take a few minutes for the laughter to die down, because they don't see bald men there. It's just not something that's current. So to see a younger man bald was like a big ha, 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 ha. Well, the chase scene started because somebody stole my hat, and I started chasing, and then we were chasing each other because everybody stole each other's hat. And there's Juanito playing the accordion with a hat on. And then we would go running by him, and somebody would grab his hat, and he had shaved his head so that he was bald. And then the laughs would start all over again, and we'd be chasing each other. And it was a huge circle and a great physical. Anyway, that's the moment that I remember that comes up when you say, anyway, that was what came up.
I love that. I especially love those moments, that sort of unexpected moment of what the audience thinks is funny, and that, oh, all of a sudden this is what it is. This is the big hit. And I know for me, it's often the parts of myself either that I take for granted or that I find incredibly frustrating are what audiences think are the funniest. Attendees, just so you know, you can chat a question in the chat and I'll ask it, or if you use the little raise hand, then you can also ask a question. I can unmute you if you want to ask a question. Okay, Michael, are you ready? Do you have a a moment of performing for these past 22 years with CWBs that sticks out?
Sure. Yeah. I have same with Moshe. It's like it's hard to choose something. There's two that come to mind. One is the picture that is used quite a bit with me spinning a ball with a young woman from South Sudan with several armed guards behind me, which happened to be one of probably the most intense day of my Clowns Without Borders career. And it was just really wild to be in the presence of such turmoil. And there we were just doing our show, and they literally walked through our show to line up on the other side of us. And we all just kind of stopped and watched them walk through. And I thought, it was so bizarre. And they were there to force people out of the shanty town, and they were going to tear the shanty town down that day in I'm sorry, it wasn't South Sudan, it was Colombia.
Colombia.
It was in Colombia.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Yeah, my apologies, Colombia. And it was just a very hot day, really intense, and I just wanted to keep going, and we did. We kept the show going, and then all the kids started being taken away because what we were told by one of the lawyers that was there, if they put the kids in the houses, they wouldn't tear the houses down. So now they're locking their children in the houses. And then we're being asked, well, would you like to stay and be witness to all of this? And we're like, sure, we could stay. Yeah, that'd be great. We stayed for a few hours, and that was one of the moments during that show and that time was I just grabbed this young girl and spun this ball, and she just lit up. And the contrast in the photograph that was taken was just serendipitous. It was very nice. And it was just such a beautiful moment to see the contrast around looking at her. And then when I saw the picture, that's when it got burned into my mind. I never paid attention to the armed guards, they weren't militia, they were police. They were police in riot gear because of that situation. And that was just a really intense moment that's burned into my head, probably because of the photograph. If somebody didn't take a photograph of it, I might not remember. But then there was another moment, just one other quick moment that's kind of an opposite moment. I was in the Philippines, and it started to rain, like torrential downpour. And we went back to the trunk to decide what we were going to do. And we all looked around, and the audience wasn't leaving. It was nice and warm, but it was sideways rain. It was crazy rain. And there's actually a gorgeous photograph of the sideways rain in Briar, clown from Australia, doing all her hula hoops. And it was just amazing that we were just like, we can't really leave. They're not leaving. So we kept going. And I actually spinning balls on my fingers in torrential pouring rain on that day. And that was kind of a huge triumph. And also this just bizarre moment where, like, I have clown shoes that I wear, and they're my old Ringling Brothers clown shoes. And they got soaked through, but I put them in front of a heater that night, and they dried up. Nothing happened to them because they're all handmade and they're leather. Like, they could take we were soaked to the bone just doing this show. And there was a moment where I would fall down, and then there was a moment where I'd get a bucket of water in my face, but it didn't matter because we were all just completely soaked. Anyway, it was a very funny moment of the four of us just being like, well, it's our last show of the day, so it doesn't really matter if we get wet. And we just went through with the show, and everybody had a great time, and they all just everybody just stood in the rain watching us, just having a delightful time. And yeah, it was just a really fun, energetic moment of like, well, here we go. And it's just kind of one of those moments where it could be 110 degrees, or it could be pouring rain, or it could be, I just saw pictures in that slideshow that there was a bunch of snow on the ground. I've never been to a trip with snow on the ground. I guess it was in the Balkans.
Yeah. So, oh, thank you. I love those stories. And that just makes me think of these, these two, sometimes like conflicting or inverse realities of CWB, which is on one hand, really acknowledging the space. Where are we? Oh, we're in a street. Oh, we're in a school. Oh, we're on a boat with lifeboats. Can they be trampolines? Oh, there are bullet holes in this wall. Do we play with that, or do we play away from it? And this place of both really acknowledging the space, and then also that moment of focusing in on the audience, either the audience as a group of people or the audience as one person. And I love that, Michael, you were able to be present, so present in the play that, for you in that moment, you actually weren't aware of the police. You were focused on the game of this girl holding her ball up, and that wonderful tension of acknowledging the space and also sometimes being present just with the person. And David, since we're talking about snow on the ground, I know you have had all types of weather, and I'm wondering if you could share a performance moment that stands out.
Yeah, I didn't know which one to pick. Michael, the stories I hear from the actual South Sudan trip with Dave Clay, those are some of the craziest Clowns Without Borders stories.
There's some pretty intense ones, yeah.
Yeah. I had these projects in Chiapas, Guatemala, Haiti that really changed my life. And probably the most one was Haiti shortly after the earthquake. And we were playing hospitals most of the time. And we're not hospital clowns, really. None of the three of us had ever done it before. But we did full shows at the entrance to the hospital. There were often hundreds of people waiting. And then we'd go do mini shows in the ward tents. It was all the hospitals were down, so it was all tents. And so it was very personal all the time. And I remember we were doing this tent where Dave Clay started doing this improv with playing with the radio, and and this girl started laughing, and then a French hospital person who spoke good French said, and I know you've all heard this from people before. She said that girl was pulled out from underneath her dead mother 7 weeks ago, and that's the first time we've seen her smile. And we totally succeeded with her. But then, like that same hospital, a little later in the day, the word got around, so they came and said, "Oh, we have this boy, and this boy has not smiled, and you got to come visit this boy." And I went to the boy alone, and he was just locked down with fear and pain. And I was playing with him and touching him and doing my tricks for him, and it slowly started to open up, and he started to smile, and he started to laugh. And then Dave Clay came to join me, and somehow this other white guy, even bigger than me and wearing a black hat, just sent him into fear again, and he locked up, and then he wouldn't open up back again after that. And so it was a real moment of like the magic that clowns can do, and sometimes limitations of what clowns can do.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for also
that project had the loudest laughter I've ever heard in my life everywhere. Was Haiti after the earthquake, over and over again. It was very much the link between comedy and tragedy was very underlined, that project.
And I think that's a tour that also, I think in terms of like, that line of when clowns and when not clowns is certainly a question that we ask over and over again in this moment of like, when is it okay to go, and that can change, and being open that that's like an audience member, like some people in an audience might want to come and then leave, and like that that's part of the dialogue and the commitment of clowning and being present is kind of being open to that moment of sometimes like, oh, this is a no. Thank you. Thank you, David. Do you want to say anything else? Because just I know that tour, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more actually of what it was like to organize during that tour, and kind of where you were staying and how you were organizing the tour in Haiti in 2010.
Well, that one wasn't the one I self-organized, actually. That was well organized by Payasos Sin Fronteras front person, and was really well organized. And we actually kept to the whole 2-week schedule, just like boom. And then people kept asking us for extra shows, and we did them. And then at a certain point, we had to start saying no too, because we were just so exhausted. Well, the story I tell a lot is we set up a show where we arrived at this hospital. We didn't have much time. We're going to do one show and then we're going to go home. We just want to get one good show in. And so we set up and we get this crowd and they're laughing and laughing. And we realize we've set up right in front of the operations tent. And people are literally getting their wounds cleaned by surgeons while watching us do our show. And people are laughing so hard. And I start improvising with this security guy. And he's at one point, I'm on my hands and knees and he's sitting on me like I'm a bench. And he's mugging and playing for the audience, Haitian security guard, and he's getting all these huge laughs. And I figure, okay, well, I'm going to collapse onto my stomach as if he collapsed me, and that'll get a huge laugh. I'm waiting, he keeps getting huge, huge laughs. And then finally, okay, seems played out. And so I did that, humongous laugh. And then this woman was in a wheelchair. And she's like laughing and laughing and laughing, and she's got a cast from her ankle to her stomach, and she falls over. And then after that was the loudest laugh I ever heard in my life. They just went crazy, and we went over the old lady and we put her up and she was fine. But it was that when there's tragedy, the people need to laugh so bad. They need to feel happiness so bad. They want it so bad. And it's a joy and it's intense.
Yes, and one of the pieces that I'm hoping, because I know you all have these stories, is these moments of either a moment of the audience kind of becoming the star of the show, right? Of like when the audience becomes the lead, and then also those moments of of the failure is funny. And I'm actually, Moshe, I'm hoping you can tell the story of your juggling balls in the slippery sand.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna request that.
Okay, I'm gonna go look for a photograph of that actually. Well, I will tell that story. Yes, I won't look for the photograph. I can't do two things at once. I'm not that computer literate. That was so in 1986, I was at Camp Winter Rainbow, which is Wavy Gravy and Jahanra's wonderful summer camp in Northern California. And everything's outdoors, and the kids come and they have a great time. They learn circus arts, and the motto of the camp is towards the fun, which I love because it's not about who's the best. It's about let's have fun together. And I'm there in that environment as a teacher, and I meet a woman who's working with the Seva Foundation. Her name is Alejandra Alvarez. She passed away about 10 years ago, and she's a wonderful soul. And she's telling me about the work that she was doing or does at that time in Chiapas with Guatemalan refugees through the Seva Foundation. And she was in charge of these 3 communities, and she had found land where these communities could regather. So these were from the Guatemalan highlands in the Civil War. They had escaped the Civil War, and they were refugees in the very south of Mexico, which is Chiapas. And they had been regrouped as communities in these spots by Alejandra. And she was working with them. And she's telling me these stories at camp about her work. And I'm very inspired. And I'm saying, wow, that's just amazing. I wish I could help, but I really don't know what I can do. And she just looks at me, clown. I was like, oh, you mean I can go down? Yeah, come down. And that was how I was introduced to the concept. At that time, there was already some clowning going on for refugees by the Women's Circus here out of San Francisco. They had gone to Nicaragua, as had Jugglers for Peace. That was during the Contra-Iran conflict. So I knew that I then put 2 and 2 together and organized a trip for myself to go down to Alejandra, and she took me to these camps. Now, I had absolutely no cross-cultural experience. I mean, I was, I had experience being in Europe and being in the States, and that was mostly it. And so there I am in this little community, and the land there is so poor that all it grows is sugarcane. And you can't grow vegetables or anything. It's just too silty, too soft. And so I'm a juggler at that time, and I'm a funny juggler, but I'm not quite a clown fully on yet. And I set up all my props on the ground to perform. And the audience is like this, they're just watching me. And I do my funny stuff. I've got a hat that pops off my head. No laughs. I do my SpongeBob routine. I play with the volunteer. No laughs. I do everything I can possibly imagine that's usually funny. No laughs. And I can't figure it out. And I didn't realize that they had never seen a person juggle before. It didn't matter if I was doing fancy tricks or juggling 5 or 3. They were just watching a man play with these, big yellow balls. So I said, okay, I'm going to try and impress them. I'm going to do 5-ball juggling. And I had the 5 balls on the ground. I picked them up, and they're now very slippery because they had been sitting on the ground. And I tried to juggle 5. You have to hold 3 balls in one hand. I can't get them to stay in my hand. They keep slipping out of my hand. And I'm trying my damnness. And I start getting frustrated after, 4 or 5 tries. I'm holding 2 in each hand and 1 in the middle and trying to get it high enough so that I can start to juggle. And I start getting frustrated, and I start hearing little chuckles and little laughs. And I start saying, oh, my frustration is creating laughter. And so I started playing with my frustration. And indeed, the laughs started coming. Then I started getting angry. That was even better. Then I was really angry, and there was a wall behind me of like a log cabin, and I went and started pounding my fists against the wall, and I came back going, ow, ow, ow. And that was hilarious. And then I went and kicked the wall with my foot and came back hopping on 1 foot, complaining miserably. And they thought that was just hilarious. And I was like, oh. So, and that's where I started to understand, that, oh, it's not the tricks, it's the human emotions, it's placing humor in being frustrated, that they can relate to that because they know what frustration is. They know what anger is. They can see me getting anger, and they like how funny I'm being with my anger. And so that's where I really learned a lot. Laughter is a release of tensions. David, the reason they were laughing so strongly in Haiti, I imagine, is because of all the tension caused by that earthquake, and the uncertainty. Is that it, or is it going to start up again? It just, yeah. Anyway, that's that story. I'll go looking for that photo while you guys talk about something else.
Thank you. Thank you for that story. And yeah, it's not the tricks, it's the human emotions. And I think that's what is so amazing when I think about certainly the three of you and then all of the clowns, as we ask these clowns to have incredible training and to have all of their skills, to have all of this technique. And then really what's under it is the emotional connection. It's that moment where it's maybe not how well can you juggle, but how well can you share frustration, and how willing are you to be laughed at? David or Michael, are either one of you ready with a story? Yeah, Michael, I see you with a story about the audience.
Yeah, David brought up South Sudan, and we had so many intense moments there. One specific one, it was very funny. We were in a UN camp, and one of those big shows, and it was a chase scene kind of moment, and the show just kept getting bigger, and the stage kept getting smaller, and
I know that story.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, we've all been there, right? And then we realized that, oh, we have no access to the van anymore. Like we have to go through the audience if we want to leave. And then the audience started to become a part of the show, right? They want to be a part of it as well. And there was a moment where we did Dead and Alive, which is something that happens really a lot with Clowns Without Borders. And Annabelle from South Africa and I were the dead ones. And we're laying on the ground, and it's just dusty dirt. And we look up, and there are vultures kind of circling around us. So we just start laughing. And like 3 little kids come in and start trying to pick us up because they're like, no, get off the ground. It's bad to be on the ground. And everybody's just losing their minds laughing because, and somebody said it's because the fat white guy kept falling down in the dirt. So, which I do a lot. That's one of my favorite things to do. And like Moshe says, it's about the failure, right? And for me, it's bringing an audience member in and letting them succeed where you've failed. And that's one of the things I really love to do with either a chair routine or even Dead and Alive, where we started the chase and we would chase in the audience. And we came out of the audience and there were like about 10 kids just chasing with us. And it was just this big chase with kids and people and laughter, and the audience kept getting bigger and bigger, and the stage kept getting smaller and smaller, to the point where it took us like 30 minutes just to leave because of getting through the audience, and everybody wants to talk to you and touch you and be a part of it and show us another trick and do this. And that's what I love about these shows, is that we get dropped into these places. Like my first Clowns Without Borders trip, I remember Rudy saying to me, I was like, Rudy, what's up? And he looked at me and he goes, these kids have never seen a white guy before. And I was like, what? And it's, of course, my ignorance being an American. Like, same with Moshe, I hadn't really had much cross-cultural work, just European and America, but not, so like being in the deep south of Mexico and Chiapas, and then being in South Sudan and being the whitest person there, I'm always the whitest guy there. The audiencers, they're always kind of amazed at why I'm there. Like, what are you doing here? And the connection that we can have, we're just stopping and kind of just taking them in so they can take you in, is really beautiful and wonderful, to just have that stillness before everything starts and just kind of like, hi, everybody. And they're like, whoa, you're a big, huge white dude. And that first trip to Chiapas, that happened really clearly because these little kids wanted to touch me. And I remember taking a photo, and it was dark out, and I took a photo with a flash, and the photo came out really beautiful. It's just these little kids in southern Mexico just reaching out to touch me. And it's just this beautiful photo that I actually took it with a disposable camera. So I didn't see it till, 2 weeks later. And I was like, oh, wow, it actually came out. But yeah, that's my experience with the audience is so, and I just love it so much. And I love it when they introduce themselves into the show without asking. That's my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah, I think that's the being seen, and then also seeing the audience is such an important piece. And in some ways it's like, oh, what is it that Clowns Without Borders does? And it's that moment of being like, well, what clowns do is they like we look at each other, and especially I think it's so exciting when we as clowns are doing our jobs correctly, each audience member feels like they could actually do what we're doing better than we could. And that's such an exciting moment when and when you ask a kid on stage and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't lift this suitcase, can you? And they're like, oh yeah, of course I can. You can't do it because you're just not strong enough, or, oh, don't you even know that's not how you do it? And David, we have so many wonderful pictures of actually you doing pieces where you're unable to lift suitcases, and when you invite audience members to kind of be the hero of the show. And I'm wondering if you could share one of those as well.
Well, when you bring audience members on stage, it becomes much more real for the audience because their community is there. And especially in difficult conditions, I like to often early in the show, to solidify the show, do a long copycat routine with a child. Bring a child up and have them play copycat and then see where it goes. Have them imitate what you do and then imitate what they do and just play copycat, and then have one simple trick that you're going to use for your finish, spinning the ball or doing sponge ball, whatever, but when that community member is there, it's so powerful. So we always do a lot of that because it makes it much more real for them. Sometimes I did solo shows in some of those early Chiapas trips. And that sometimes was difficult to get a full rapport with an audience by myself. And bringing a kid up on stage and putting them in the center. Oh, you've got it made now. That was so nice. I remember in Chiapas, the mistake I would make is I would go on the first one to get my first volunteer, or in Guatemala, the Mayan indigenous people. They were so shy. You'd go to get your first volunteer and 50 people would stand up and start to run away. And you go, oh, I have to go a lot slower, don't I? And then the opposite was like in Palestine, where you had to bring a volunteer in sneakily and get him in, because if you indicated that you wanted to volunteer, then the entire school stands up and floods the stage, and then you got to spend 4 minutes trying to get them pushed back and make a space again,
I remember, yeah, in Chiapas, Rudy and I would do a handshaking game with the audience because none of them would come up, and if you took one step towards them, the whole audience would take 10 steps back. But if you went up to shake their hand, they were fine with that. So we would go down the line shaking hands, and at some point Rudy would say, this one, and just bring them out before they could even think about it. And once they're out, they were fine. They were happy to be out there, but they were too shy to actually be willing to go on their own.
I love that. And also, of course, remember that, we say the audience, but of course, each audience of each each country and even, you know, the same town or the same school to, you know, no audience is the same. And, you know, we have this singular noun, the audience, but the audience is as many people are there. And whether that's 25 people or 2,500 people, you have to play to and connect with each person who's there. And I always love that moment of realizing, like, oh, this is the person who likes this, and this is the person who doesn't like that. Okay, and how do we make a show that that everyone can feel good about? And attendees, you're awfully quiet in the chat. Maybe you know, like, that's fine. But if you have questions that you want to ask, now is the moment to type them in. So if I were to say to you, but Moshe, David, Michael, why clowning? Does clowning even matter? Of all of the huge issues in the world, is it really actually important for there to be clowns without borders? What do you think? Oh, Moshe, you're smiling, and I don't know if that means you want to answer, but I'm going to spotlight you and let you answer.
Well, I mean, clowns are important in that, you know, we're bringing laughter into places where they may not think of celebrating on their own. The situation is not so great. They're outside of their usual, especially if they're in a refugee camp, they're outside of their usual situation. And when the clowns come in and create a show, it brings the community together to celebrate, to enjoy a moment, which is not their everyday activity. And so I feel for that reason, it's important because it gives the community a chance to gather in celebration and to remind them of what their life was like before they were refugees, and to remind them of the possibility of what they can go back to.
Thank you. David, I'm gonna.
Well, I think that question only comes up for people who haven't been to those situations. Once people see the show, they totally understand how important it is when you hear, you know, this child hasn't laughed for months and that child just laughs. That child may be able to sleep tonight and hasn't been able to sleep. I think, Naomi, you were trying to get me to talk about my first Haiti trip before the earthquake, when I kind of just had nothing but a list of contacts and organized the whole thing as we were going. And at first we contacted these various helping organizations, you know, Save the Children, all these smaller organizations, and they would go, a clown show, huh? But then we did a few shows, and then every organization wanted us. And then we couldn't do all the shows because we had made all these contacts. Then everybody, they saw when you come to a poor community and you make the entire little community just laugh and have the best time of their life for an hour and a half, and they're happy for the rest of the day. They're different. The next day is different there. I mean, that's the way I've experienced it. We're not as important as food and water. We're clowns.
Thank you, David. And now, okay, Michael, but do clowns even matter? Why clowns? It's because I've taken classes with Moshe, who is, you know, likes to say that clowns are contrarian, and that's part of my inspiration for asking this question.
Why clowns? For me, what Moshe and David said is spot on. And to add to and be more specific, I guess, is the red nose. There's a certain kind of accessibility to especially cultures outside the United States. what I've learned is that the clown has a bad rep in the US, and it's getting much better. It feels like it's growing. And I think Clowns Without Borders has a lot to do with that, in my opinion. And other clowns in the country, that the definition of clown is not just the American circus clown anymore, which is really nice. Even though I was an American circus clown and I love the American circus clown.
I was going to say.
But I don't want to be killed by any Ringling X's. But the clown that we bring to these other countries, at least the one that I bring to, is the red nose has this ability to have accessibility beyond the human, and also be a comic truth teller of sorts. So we take tragedy, and like Moshe said in his story, that we take that tragedy, and David said it as well, and we kind of not make fun of it, but find some triumph over it. And it becomes either triumphant, or, me falling off a chair is funny. And when somebody takes a chair away from me, it can be funny because I fall down. But at the end, somebody gets to sit in the chair. And sometimes it's an audience member, which is really nice. So it's this ability to laugh at failure and still be triumphant at the end, and kind of create hope. And I think the red nose itself gives me personally a step beyond being just a guy coming in and doing a show. You put a nose on my face and I become something else. And I think that's why the clown is so important, because it's accessible across all cultures. And I'm just an American coming in doing shows is different than a clown from America coming to do shows. So the red nose, I think, gives us access in a way that people don't actually really understand until, like David said, until you see it. And then you go, oh, that makes more sense. So yeah, that's why clown is important to me. That's why the clown is important to me.
Thank you so much. We're towards the end of our time. Linda has a question, and Linda is actually going to get the last question of the panel. But before I say that, wonderful attendees, you have the option of a little bit more clowning today, and then the rest of your lives, you have the option for a lot more clowning if you choose. But you can join Moshe for about 20 minutes right after this for a levity pause with Moshe and have an experiential experience. Ooh, I don't know what you're gonna do, but you're gonna be with Moshe. And I'm gonna put a new link in here. I'm also putting the link to our website, and then also a donate link if you feel inspired to help us continue this work.
Oh, you think? But wait. Can I share screen for a second? Or should I? Nah.
You wanna?
Yeah,
Yep,
let's see that picture.
Go
You
for
want
it.
to see that picture?
Yep, we want to see that picture. You can try out. I can't stop you from trying.
All right, so there I am, and those famous balls are in the beyond the clubs, and all those kids and their moms were looking at me a little suspiciously. In fact, when I wanted to do close-up magic, and I took a step towards them, they were like stepping back. Anyways, there you go. Okay,